Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where everything is beautiful and nobody gets hurt. I am your host, Clueless Caleb, and we are going to start this week's Weird News with a bunch of failures on grand scales. This includes an art exhibit that was sold for $150,000 that included a banana taped to a wall, except they forgot to ship it to New York without the banana. What a bunch of losers. And then, in the next segment, we'll get to the nice folks that are changing their roles in life, and this includes the very famous story that's going around right now, in which a pastor became a stripper, seemingly overnight, as well as an etiquette teacher who fought off ninjas in New York. And then we will wrap up the weird news with some of the goofiest stories of the week, including a sheriff's department who did not recognize that it was illegal to lie on official paperwork. What a bunch of fools. And then we will conclude with my top 10 unusual last wills and testaments. How some of the great men and women of history decided to leave their legacy. And most of it's pretty odd, to be frank. Okay, we're going to start this week with the Florida story of the week, because I don't think we had one last time. A neighbor calls 911 when Florida hockey fans yell, "Shoot! Shoot!" So, obviously they meant for them to shoot the puck into the goal, but a concerned neighbor thought that it was fit to call the police, which I suppose makes sense out of context. The call prompted several Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputies to show up at the hockey fan's apartment door. He and two friends had gathered to watch the game, and by the first period, the trio of men began screaming for a goal, which prompted the 911 call. And it should be noted that the caller told dispatchers that somebody was yelling loudly in the apartment above his own just before 8:30 p.m. last Wednesday. And, quote, "So they came to the door and thought we had guns in the house. We were like, nope, we're just screaming for Steven Stamkos." Wow, good job, fellas. That line never works for me. According to the Sheriff's Office dispatch report released Thursday, the complainant told police he heard a couple of screaming at each other, with one yelling, quote, "I dare you to shoot." Their neighbor entered himself into a fictional movie in which the neighboring married couple was about to shoot each other. According to the Sheriff's Office dispatch report, deputies went on their way after talking to everybody involved. Quote, "The police completely understood and just laughed it off, but they thought it was serious because I was screaming, 'Shoot!' as in shoot the puck." And we can use deductive reasoning to conclude that their chants were impactful as Tampa beat Dallas 5-2 in Game 3. Now, boy howdy, that was a funny story. Unfortunately, it's over now, but I have an even better story. Parrots were removed from a UK wildlife park after they started swearing at the customers. First of all, why would a wildlife park have customers? I don't know, perhaps the article will answer for that. But as for now, a group of parents at the zoo were shocked and appalled as many parrots started swearing at them after they came out of quarantine. I guess the parents liked the little safe space that the pandemic gave them. The 5 African gray parrots were adopted by Lincolnshire Wildlife Park on August 15th, but it appears they used their time in isolation teaching each other foul language, which left park staff in hysterics. Now, I find flaw in that little description because I think it left all park staff except for one person in hysterics. That one person no doubtably taught the birds the foul language. Nevertheless, it is said that swift action was taken when the birds started using obscene language with the guests. The CEO of the park, goodness gracious, they have privatized parks, said that the birds were put into a timeout, but admitted over the last 25 years he has taken many parrots, quote, that have sometimes had a bit of a blue language issue. Never heard it put that way before. He went on to say, quote, every now and then you'll get one that swears, and it's always funny. We always find it very comical when they do swear at you. See, that's what I love about the UK. Brutal honesty. The only problem is they suspect that only one of the birds was taught how to swear, and during the shutdown, the bird must have been swearing an awful lot, and that is what caused all the other birds to keep swearing. The CEO himself said that it's a vicious cycle, quote, the more they swear, the more you usually laugh, which makes them want to swear again. I know how that is. The park chief said that the birds learnt to swear and laugh at each other, which led to something akin to, quote, an old working men's club scenario. Within 20 minutes of them being on display to the public, there were reports of the parrots swearing at a customer, and things quickly escalated. Quote, we found it highly amusing, and the customers were fine. There were no problems at all. But we worried because we had a weekend coming up, and children were going to be coming. So what? Why do you have to get rid of the funny birds? Get rid of the kids. Just put a sign up that says, sorry, in an effort to have fun, we are banning all children. Anyways, tragically, the birds were placed on an offshore enclosure in the hopes that they would be influenced by other parrots to behave more appropriately. My hope is that the cursing parrots influence the non-cursing parrots, and all of a sudden, we have an avian edition of the Jersey Shore. And just like the Jersey Shore, it is said that this park is going to lose about 400 million euros because of this. That's one of the problems when you invest your entire future in birds. Quote, it has been a rough year, but we are the eternal optimist, and we have no option. We have to keep moving forward. I like how the bird CEO's quote would fit perfectly well with General MacArthur's in World War II. It's been a rough year, but we are the eternal optimists, and we have no option. We have to keep moving forward into German territory. Anyway, the CEO's goal is to be in possession of completely polite birds by next Easter. That's a really funny agenda to have on your business chart. Quote, we hope to have kind of normality by then. The park has also made headlines around the world after a video of Chico, a parrot in the park, singing Beyoncé's If I Were a Boy. After the music cover went viral, people came to the park in order to see the Chico bird, and then they heard the foul-mouthed parrots, which turned them all away. Quote, it is quite an unusual place where you are walking around and people are swearing at aviaries, trying to get a parrot to swear back at them. The site has become an adult theme park. No, sir, Vegas is an adult theme park. Your park is for people who think birds and cursing are funny. Okay, next story. I promise to be a little less cynical on this one. A $150,000 art installation featuring a banana taped to a wall was donated to a New York museum without the banana. Okay, I lied. I'm going to be entirely cynical about this story. Italian artist Maurizio Catalian's piece, Comedian, better known as The Banana Taped to a Wall, is now in the hands of Solomon R. Guggenheim, which is a museum in Manhattan, who received the work of art which sold for more than $100,000 at Art Basel Miami in December 2019 from an anonymous donation. What kind of altruist looks at a banana and says, yes, I will donate that? You know how many bananas you could have bought for over $100,000 and shipped to the countries that really need bananas? What a joker. Quote, we are grateful recipients of the gift of Comedian. So a further demonstration of the artist's deft connection to the history of modern art will be displayed in our museum, according to the Guggenheim's director, who went on to say, quote, beyond which it offers little stress to our storage. Because bananas don't take up that much room. The banana taped to a wall caused a huge stir when it went on display at Art Basel, which is known for drawing huge celebrities along with patrons of the arts with deep pockets and all-around idiots. The basic piece garnered international headlines, including the cover page of the New York Post, and attracted massive crowds of public commerce who were all clamoring to take a selfie with the world's most famous banana. But the story of the banana did not truly blow up until a performance artist grabbed the banana off of the exhibit and ate it for a piece that he titled, quote, "Hungry Artist." I love this fellow. The best part was after he ate the banana, he just pulled another one out of his pocket and taped it to the wall. It's just all so silly. And to prove that, according to Art Basel Miami, the performance artist's stunt did not ruin or even devalue the artwork, since buyers of the quote comedian don't actually receive the banana on display. Instead, they get the piece's certificate of authenticity, along with a 14-page list of instructions detailing how to correctly display the banana. What a bunch of losers. If you ask me, if somebody eats a famous piece of artwork, you cannot even begin to claim that it ever was a piece of artwork, much less that it still is a piece of artwork. But I'll be honest, I know nothing about art. Perhaps I'm wrong. Leave a comment below on what you think about bananas in the art scene. The banana received so much attention that the festival eventually took it down to try to control the crowds. But it was still a major success. 2 editors from the Catalan's piece sold for $120,000, while another buyer purchased a 3rd edition of the banana for $150,000. These people are insane. Although, to be fair, if I had $150,000, it would take 1 trip to the Lego store and 1 trip to the liquor store in order to lose all $150,000. So I suppose it's not that big of a difference between me and them. Quote, "It appealed to me for its absurdity and the effect on the public." According to one of the buyers of the banana, "I observed all the Basel visitors taking their selfie, and I thought that it was such a reflection of our time." She paid $150,000 for a reflection on stupidity. She also said that once she bought the art piece, it came with instructions for the artwork, which included how often to change out the banana and how high above the ground it should be installed. Quote, "Of all the works I have to confront, this is probably one of the simplest. It's duct tape and a banana." Wow, fantastic observation. She also noted that the instructions do not specifically mention how the big banana should be or where it should be purchased. Quote, "The idea is that it's a banana. Go buy a banana." How did this lady get $150,000 spare dollars to spend on this piece of art? Her grandpa probably invented those levels you use in your garage. The little tube filled with water with a bubble in it to make sure something's level. Her grandpa probably invented that, and now she's a millionaire. Anyway, I'm obviously just jealous. So let's move on to a less intellectually challenging story. A loud bang in a trailer park turns out to be ravioli cans. This occurred in Pennsylvania, where loud bangs heard in a trailer park in the White Deer Township, Union County, turned out not to be gunfire or fireworks as had been suspected, but rather Chef Boyardee's ravioli cans. The police were dispatched to a residence at White Deer Trailer Park on Interstate Avenue shortly before 3 a.m. September 21st for a report of 3 loud bangs. Once the troopers investigated, they found that an unknown suspect had thrown 3 Chef Boyardee ravioli cans at the residence and damaged a rear window. The cans had struck a metal trailer located behind the residence, which caused the loud noises. And most importantly, a local trooper is investigating for criminal mischief. Oh, best of luck to him. Okay, we are now going to go to a break, but why don't you stay tuned for the next segment in which we will cover the biggest story of the week, no doubt, in which a pastor turns into a stripper, as well as other role shifts that are taking place in society. We will get to those and more if you stay tuned after the break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where one day you will look back on the little things and realize they were big things. Speaking of which, let's talk about the bisexual pastor who turned into a stripper, who, quote, blesses the world with her sacred sexuality through OnlyFans. This 36-year-old lady grew up in a strict Baptist family with a strong, stereotypical gender role, as she was expected to be quiet, reserved, and ever so sweet. Of course, a career as an entertainer was totally out of the question. Quote, from a young age, I had fantasized about being a stripper, but I was indoctrinated to believe my desires and my body were innately sinful and bad. I was taught that women are not allowed to lead, and that women belong in the kitchen and with the children. So even though it went against everything I was told, I decided to become a pastor because of my love for performing. Wow, so that to me is even more interesting than her becoming a stripper. She became a pastor because she wanted to be a stripper, and she herself never considered her sexuality until 2016 when she, quote, attended an LGBT plus theater performance. It was a revelation for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm straight. And it rocked my world. I knew if I revealed my queerness, I would lose it all because the church is not welcoming to queer people. She went on to say that it was a struggle to keep her sexuality a secret, as she felt that it was emblematic of her living a, quote, very duplicitous life, one that she knew she could not continue. So, on July 4th, 2017, she gave her last sermon at the church and simply walked away without looking back. Quote, I just never showed up again. Truly the best way to quit a job. She went on to say that she came out publicly as queer in a confessional YouTube video. It was a huge step, and as she faced the prospect of starting anew, she, quote, decided to hire a life coach to guide her. I started following my life coach's wife on Instagram, who was doing lingerie modeling. I was kind of triggered by it, but I was also magnetically drawn to it. Which proves my theory that people love to be angry. After years of repression, the picture sparkled something within her that she saw and was keen to explore further. She signed up for a class called the, quote, Sexpress You, which gave her the confidence boost she needed to book her first nude photo shoot. Good gravy. She goes on to say, quote, I cried because I had never felt more holy and sacred in my life. I never felt more sexy and liberated than I did then. She goes on to say that she felt that it was time to turn that feeling into a career, which is why she is now able to earn a good living selling explicit photos and videos on OnlyFans, which from what I understand is a paid pornography website where you get to pay the person you want to stare at for a couple hours. On top of this, she's also a life coach and offers courses such as, quote, how to un-F yourself, in which she teaches others how to be true to themselves. How can you teach others to be true to themselves? Isn't that oxymoronic? I don't know. She now identifies as bisexual and pansexual. Who cares? Quote, every person has the right to express themselves. There you go. In whatever way feels good to them. And this is how it feels good to me. My sexuality is incredibly healing and sacred. And when I give this gift to people, it blesses them. Alright, now I'm gonna play you an excerpt from one of her sermons, completely out of context, just because it's absolutely hilarious, as it just makes no sense at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and play that for you guys.
And what's more beautiful, you guys, than that is the gospel message. And that is when God made us insiders. God made us complete insiders, not partial insiders like these women were in NASA. God made us complete insiders. These women were a group of outsiders. And today we're going to take a look at another group of outsiders found in Scripture that are easily overlooked and often missed. And those are the eunuchs.
She goes from insiders to outsiders to NASA to eunuchs. Beautiful. She belongs on this program. I should see if I can make her a co-host. That'd be awesome. Okay, but another story about people usurping their perceived roles in life. An etiquette teacher fights off a ninja who was mugging another person in Manhattan. So this was just a regular mugger in a ninja costume, of course, as they have in Manhattan, who is said to have got a much-needed lesson in manners last Monday from a Manhattan mother who happens to be as good at kickboxing as she is at teaching etiquette. The mother proved to be no pushover when she was attacked from behind by the robber who tried to make off with her purse while she was walking with her 3-year-old daughter shortly after 9 a.m. Goodness gracious, that is one ballsy frickin' ninja over here. The 38-year-old screamed and fought off the ninja long enough for 2 construction workers and a doorman to come and rescue her. Oh, I thought this was going to be an empowering story. What the heck? The do-gooders chased down the costumed crook and led him until police arrived. Quote, I think he was shocked that I fought back. I think I was more aggressive than he intended, but I train for this stuff. I leave my manners classes and I go kickboxing. I like her. She also said that she suffered bruises on her back and arms after she fell, even though she kept kicking. She also tore a thumbnail. Goodness gracious. Every single time this story usurps gender roles, it just automatically buries her with traditional gender roles and other stereotypes. It's kind of funny. Quote, there was a little tug of war over the bag for maybe about a second, and then he started running. Once I think he saw the attention coming, which she says in reference to the construction workers. She goes on to say, quote, the doorman and the 2 construction workers did their thing and just grabbed him and held him. Nice, that is hot. She went on to say, quote, I went into mama bear mode after the mugging in a black ninja costume with a red cloth around his forehead. He interrupted a pleasant walk I was having with my daughter. All I could think about was survival. There you go, man. Quote, it feels like he came out of nowhere. He came to my right side where my bag was, but it was looped around my shoulder. Ah, she's always one step ahead. Quote, he didn't say anything. I still had my bag in my possession, and I kicked him. I just started kicking. The self-defense courses I've taken took over my body. She went on to say that her proper demeanor most likely made her look like an easy target for such ninjas in Manhattan. She didn't say that directly, that's more of a paraphrase. Quote, I don't want to be seen as a helpless victim. I teach etiquette at the Plaza Hotel. I am always in a dress and high heels, but I want people to know that they can be ladylike and fight off an attacker at the same time. Alright, let me write that down. Note to self, I can be ladylike and be able to fight off an attacker at the same time. Cops arrested the 41-year-old ninja and charged him with robbery. Oh, that's it? They should have a law against being a ninja in Manhattan. Authorities said that he has several prior arrests in New York and New Jersey, dating back to 2014 for criminal mischief and possession of drug paraphernalia. Quote, "We got the man and he's off the streets and I hope he stays off the streets. This isn't an innocent person. This is a violent man that would attack a mom with her child. He was aggressive. Had I been thinking clearly, I would have just given him my bag. I was just in Mama Bear mode." Ah, yes, Mama Bear mode. Everybody knows that even though women have been descended from bears for many generations, they still hold the vital gene of Mama Bear mode. She also said that she noticed an uptick in crime in recent weeks. "I've been getting mugged by more and more ninjas every week." That's not a direct quote, by the way. She says that it has affected how she operates indoors and outside. Quote, "I don't walk around with jewelry. I don't walk around with super nice things. Just my child." Sorry. Quote, "I walk around with things I don't think I would be upset if I lost. You have to think that way now. It's sad. I'm extra careful. At home, I've got a full alarm system. Even with that, that's a crazy part. This can happen in the morning on a weekday, just walking down the street." She also said that her attacker could use a little etiquette. Quote, "I'm all about educating people on manners. This guy certainly needs some. You go, sister." Alright, time for the third and final story, in which a Romanian village re-elects a dead mayor saying he deserves to win. This is the third article in reference to people who we'll just say broke through the glass ceiling when it comes to living a life adverse to the one they should be living. So this dead guy got elected mayor. Why can't we in America do that for president? Slappy White 2020, that's all I'm saying. An obituary photo of former mayor Ion Oliman, that's a brilliant name, Ion Oliman, who was taped to the walls of the city hall in southern Romania last Monday. Romanian villagers have re-elected this mayor by a large landslide, even though he died 2 weeks ago from COVID-19. When asked, the people said that he had done a good job and deserved his posthumous victory. Wow, I said posthumous right. A video shared on social media showed dozens of villagers visiting the grave on Ion Aliman, a social democrat, to light candles after voting, which ended last Sunday's local elections. Quote, "It is your victory," one man can be heard saying. Quote, "Know that you will be proud of us. Rest in peace." According to the Electoral Bureau, quote, "He was a real mayor to us." One unnamed woman who wore a surgical mask told private television, quote, "He took the side of the village, respected all the laws. I don't think we will see a mayor like him again." Aliman, who was a former Navy officer who would have turned 57 last Monday, died on September 17th, tragically, in a hospital in southern Romania. His name was already on the printed voting ballots and could not be removed, officials said. A new election will be held. Oh no! Come on, can't the government just leave Romania alone for a few months? It'll be fantastic. I love Romania, by the way. Very few countries have had such a tremendous trajectory towards freedom in the past couple decades. But Romania definitely has that kind of momentum. In 2008, a village in eastern Romania also knowingly re-elected their mayor who had died just after voting began. Despite Aliman's victory, his Social Democrat Party lost key cities and country councils across Romania last Sunday to the centrist minority liberal government and USR+, which is an alliance of two center-right groupings. Please keep in mind that center, center-right, and liberal mean very different things in Eastern European countries. I encourage you to research it yourself. Romania has reported 123,944 COVID-19 infections since last February, with 4,748 deaths, which is the highest fatality rate in the European Union's eastern wing. Death is a consequence of freedom, and so is life. Ah, isn't that poetic? Now, unfortunately, that's the end for the segment, which reflects on people who live outside of their given roles in life, which I think is a beautiful segment. I'm going to try to find more stories like that in the future. At least they are incredibly entertaining. But in the next segment, we are going to get into some of the goofiest stories of the week, including a sheriff deputy who lied on his reports and testified that he didn't know that lying on official reports was illegal. I can't wait to get to that one. That goes against everything I stand for. And we'll also get to airborne Yom Kippur ritual for Jews that lock down in Melbourne, which has planes flying around chickens. I can't wait to get to that one. So why don't you stay tuned, and later on we will even get to the top 10 unusual last wills and testimonies. Stay tuned for that.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where we are what we pretend to be, and therefore we must be very careful about what we pretend to be. Doing some Kurt Vonnegut quotes this time around. We are going to jump right into our goofiest stories of the week, in which an OC Sheriff's Department who lied on his reports testifies that he did not know it was illegal to lie on his reports. So, these two Orange County Sheriff deputies were actually fired on convictions of lying on their police reports, and then they testified recently before a grand jury that they did not know it was illegal to falsify the documents. The 39 and the 31-year-old had neglected to book evidence, which led them to falsify their reports. They claimed that there was a routine practice of the sheriff deputies to book evidence by the end of each shift, as required by department policy and state laws, and that was ignored for years in hundreds of cases where evidence was booked late or not at all, which was a, quote, internal audit found. Way to go, OC Sheriff's Department. It only took you a few hundred false arrests before you audited your evidence. Oh boy. The two considered the worst offenders in the department said that they found evident scandal, as they were allowed to plead guilty in June to a misdemeanor charge of willful omission to perform their official duty, and then they were given 1 year informal prohibition with no jail time and no community service and no fine. Even they sent many people to jail and gave many people fines, and of course gave a whole bunch of a lot prohibition. The two testified during the recent grand jury hearing for another deputy, who was a man who rejected the plea deal and was subsequently indicated for a felony charge of falsifying a police report. He was a 19-year-old veteran who wrote in a 2017 report that he booked a knife, methamphetamine, and a glass smoking pipe into the evidence locker when he had not at all. The two veteran liars told grand jurors during Mora's hearing that they had never been trained on Penal Code section, making it illegal to falsify in their reports that they had booked evidence, typically guns, drugs, monies, photos, etc. And then the special prosecutor against them told the grand jurors that he had gave the plea deal to another man because they had not been informed of the Penal Code section for lying on an official report, which brings to light the fault that in these officers' defense, Other idiots have gotten off because they claimed that they did not know it was illegal to lie on official reports. So by this point, lying is tradition. Quote, "So I let them plead to the less serious charge because I thought it was justified under the circumstances." And I think you will recall also their testimony that not any ignorance of the law is an excuse, but rather that they had never heard of this government code section before. And I don't think any of these people ever thought that the penal code section applies to them in what they are doing. What a bunch of nerds. Turns out, if you get to decide whether people go to jail or not for their entire lives, you should probably read up on the literature that determines whether or not it's okay to lie on the basis of whether or not they go to jail for the rest of their lives. A spokeswoman for the Sheriff's Department said that the deputies were indeed trained on the importance of filing evidence. Quote, "Training on evidence, chain of custody, and booking of evidence is taught repeatedly in both basic academic sectors as well in our field of training officer program. In addition, evidence booking protocols and policy now require deputies to include confirmation of the booked evidence in their report. Therefore, it is then reviewed by a supervisor before being signed off." She went on to say, quote, "The department also conducts randomized spot checks every month, pulling reports and cross-referencing the evidence booking system to ensure evidence is booked as documented. To date, the spot checks have confirmed that the new protocols are effective and evidence is booked as documented in the reports." This nice young lady has been said to work for the U.S. Attorney for Southern District of California and as head of San Diego County District Attorney's Public Integrity Division. She is now reviewing at least 14 other cases of mishandling evidence to determine if criminal charges are warranted. So there are bad cops in a lot of these offices, but there is somebody out there who is going to take them all out. However, it should be said that the lady's questioning of 18 different witnesses has brought a lot of criticism to her credentials. In a motion for unrelated case on Thursday, September 24th, one prosecutor accused the woman of hurling softball questions at deputy witnesses, acting more like an apologist than a prosecutor. Quote, "She attempted to convince the grand jury and those who would later report on proceedings that neither the officer nor any other member of law enforcement should be treated severely for writing false reports and filing false book evidence. With each witness, she asked a series of leading questions designed to present the violator as simply a hard-changing member of a competitive group of crime fighters who, too, got caught up in getting the bad guys to always book evidence or write reports that were accurate." So basically, the prosecutor of the prosecutor is arguing that the prosecuted prosecutor is arguing that her deputies are simply too competitive when it comes to fighting crime, which of course is undermining the objective. However, it is said that deputies told that they were pressured to make arrests and never to book the evidence, which they considered a lower priority than kept as a basic form of prosecution dedicated to keeping criminals away from the streets. Another spokesperson for the district attorney's office responded, quote, "The grand jury returned an indictment, and that speaks for itself." Basically, her argument is the bad cops are being punished. What are you complaining about? Nevertheless, a report that came out of the Sheriff's Department in November of 2019 reported that sheriff's audits had found that deputies routinely booked evidence late. The probe, which covered the period from February 2016 to February 2018, found that 27% of deputies waited over a month or longer before booking evidence. Nearly 300 items did not get booked for more than a month during the audit period. A second review, which included a sampling of 450 reports, found that deputies in 57 different cases said that they had booked the evidence when they had not at all. Clearly, there's work to be done, but I would rather talk about the airborne Yom Kippur ritual for locked down Melbourne Jews. So, a Melbourne pilot took to the skies last week with 3 chickens on Sunday to carry out a pre-Yom Kippur ritual that was otherwise off limits for the city's locked-down Jews due to COVID-19 pandemic. Kapurat, which is practiced by some Orthodox Jews, involves swinging a live chicken over one's head 3 times and reciting a prayer to transfer sins to the bird. The chicken is then slaughtered and donated to the poor. Hey, poor people, come eat this sinful chicken. This year, with large gatherings off limits because of the coronavirus pandemic, those who practiced rituals traditionally have struggled with how to carry it out. A Brooklyn organization is offering to deliver chickens to people's homes in Israel, where the government has imposed stringent rules to be met regarding COVID-19 infections. Kippur is among the permitted reasons for travel. Otherwise, Melbourne is entirely locked down. So, an enterprising philanthropist with access to an airplane decided to conduct a symbolic version above the heads of all Melbourne's Jews by flying with chickens in circles over the city. What a frickin' hero. The hour-long low-altitude flight circled over suburbs with large Jewish populations, including... who cares? The plane carried 3 chickens, 2 male, 1 female. Who cares? It is traditional for men to swing male chickens and women to swing hens. Tradition. Quote, I don't think anyone here thinks they could be fulfilling one's ritual obligation with the foul flyover, according to a Melbourne resident. So at least they recognize the absurdity of this all. And he went on to say, quote, but it was definitely a nice start to the day. Oh, I'm so moving to Melbourne. That's just fantastic. Okay, final story of the week. I'm going to get scientific on you fellas. I know it's not really weird news, but I like it a heck of a lot. Finally, we know how much radiation there is on the moon, and it's not good news. Sorry, I love science articles. As the U.S. prepares to return humans to the moon this decade, one of the biggest dangers future astronauts will have to face in space is radiation, which can cause lasting health effects from cataracts to cancer and neurodegenerative diseases. Now, I feel slightly betrayed because there's about a 90% chance I will contract all 3 of those health disorders, and yet I never got to go to the moon. What the heck's up with that? Though the Apollo missions of the 1960s and 70s proved it was safe for people to spend a few days in lunar surface, NASA did not take daily radiation measurements that would help scientists quantify how long crews should be able to stay. This question was resolved, however, last Friday when a Chinese-German team, not going to make any jokes there, published in the Journal of Science Advances the results of experiments which were carried out in 2019. Quote, the radiation of the moon is between 2 and 3 times higher than what you have in the ISS, which is the International Space Station, according to an astrophysicist in the University of Kiel, who went on to say, quote, so that limits your stay to approximately 2 months on the surface of the moon. Oh no! What is the point of all these ridiculous studies? You can only stay on the moon for 2 months, no more, no less. He went on to add that once radiation exposure from the roughly week-long journey there and the week back is taken into account, that will only leave you with a few weeks to be on the surface of the moon. What a dope. Has anybody stayed a full day on the moon? I don't know. Let me check that out real quick. Okay, so Aldrin and Armstrong spent 21 hours on the moon. So yeah, I think we don't have to worry about limiting our time on the moon to a month and a half. Quote, the radiation of the moon is between 2 to 3 times higher than that of what you have on the ISS. There are several sources of radiation exposure. Galactic cosmic rays. Galactic is not a word. I think they meant galactic. As well as sporadic solar particles. And neutrons and gamma rays from interactions between space radiation and the lunar soil. Radiation is measured using the unit savant. Who cares? The team found that the radiation exposure on the moon is 1,369 microsieverts per day, which is 2.6 higher than that of the International Space Station. This is because the ISS is still partially shielded by the Earth's perspective magnetic bubble. Who cares? Earth's atmosphere provides additional protection for humans. Who cares? Quote, the radiation levels were measured on the moon, which are about 200 times higher than that of the surface of Earth, and 5 to 10 times higher than on a flight from New York to Frankfurt. Oh, go to heck, you got dang scientists. The radiation on the moon is so bad that it's worse than a flight from New York to Frankfurt. Who cares? The important thing is that NASA is planning to bring humans to the moon by 2024, and it has said that it has plans for long-term presence that would include astronauts working and living on the surface. There you go. These people get shot out of a giant missile off of Earth, which has exploded about 1 out of every 3 times it's been launched. And you think they're worried about more radiation than you get from a plane flight to New York from Frankfurt. You must be out of your tree. These people couldn't care less about your local radiation. Okay, enough about my outrage. Stay tuned to the next segment when I'll give you my top 10 unusual last wills and testaments from some goddamn goofy people. Alright, stay tuned for that.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where we continually jump off cliffs, developing our wings on the way down. I don't know what that means, let me know in the comments below. Starting with number 10, William Goddang Shakespeare, whose dying request was that he has caused much speculation about his relationship with his wife, Anne Hathaway. It's a different Anne Hathaway than the one you're thinking of. Not only was it an unusual request, it was tacked on to the document as if it were an afterthought. He asked that his wife receive his, quote, second best bed. Leaving a bed to somebody was not itself an unusual thing at the time, as a good quality bed with no fleas or vermin was highly prized. Due to the volatility caused by disease and poor overall hygiene in the area, this made beds very expensive. But that wasn't the only controversial thing Shakespeare did. He also left in his epitaph on his grave, quote, "Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed by he that moves my bones." So, of course, many people say that Shakespeare was simply trying to frighten off grave robbers. But the wording was taken so seriously at the time that when his wife died 7 years after him, people refused to bury her body next to his because they were afraid of accidentally moving his bones. Okay, number 9, Virgil. So Virgil is, of course, the great Roman poet most renowned for his Aeneid, once the national poem of Rome itself. Prior to his death, however, he had completed only 12 books. What a loser, as opposed to the 24 of the epic poems of Homer. Poor Virgil, always looking up to the Simpsonite. Because he felt incomplete, he left instructions that it be destroyed by fire after his death. I like how dramatic the poets are. My poems were too short. Burn them! His friends found out of his desires to destroy his work, and they managed to finally convince him to remove the request from his will. Through peer pressure, he eventually consented, and the poem was published to great acclaim, and it is now what Virgil is most well known for producing. Alright, number 8, George Bernard Shaw, who died in 1950. And for those who don't know Shaw, he was always very hard on religion. And as a result, his will included a section that gave his support to, quote, Darwin's millennia saga of creation, in opposition to the Bible's, quote, 6-day synopsis. As a result, he ordered no religious services and that his tombstone not, quote, take the form of a cross or any other instrument of torture or symbol of blood sacrifice. He also created a 40-letter phonetic alphabet in order to make spelling much simpler. As part of his will, he left sizable portion of his estate to promote the new alphabet. This was overruled by a court as it was, quote, impossible, and the money was distributed to 3 different organizations: the British Museum, the National Gallery of Ireland, and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. Alright, number 7, Benjamin Franklin. This one's a personal favorite just because of how dumb it is. For such a smart guy to have such a dumb will test me is hilarious. Quote, that in a democracy my daughter shall not engage in the expensive, vain, and useless pastime of wearing jewelry. So Benjamin Franklin was one of the most admired men in the Western world in the late 18th century. The reason for this odd request was said that as a former ambassador to France, Benjamin Franklin was given a portrait of King Louis XVI in a frame studded with 408 diamonds. He left this picture and frame to his daughter Sarah, with the above proviso that she does not get to remove the diamonds from the frame in order to make jewelry for herself. It is unknown whether or not his daughter did so. Anyways, I kind of hope that she did, because it would be incredibly hilarious. I mean, why would you put diamonds on the frame of a photo? Don't you want the imagery to be what people are drawn to, not the actual frame itself? Bunch of dullards. Okay. Number 6. Charlie Dickens, one of my favorite writers, who requested, quote, those who attend my funeral should not wear scarfs, cloaks, black bows, long hat bands, or other such revolting absurdities. I love this guy so much. In addition to the above, Dickens also wrote that he was not to have a public funeral, and the place and time of his funeral should not be made known to the people. He also requested that an inexpensive and simple funeral should occur with only 3 plain, quote, mourning coaches. His requests were ignored, of course, on a grand scale, as he was honored with a huge funeral cortege, with every single member present in full funeral regalia. His funeral was a national event, and the man who was used to getting what he wanted in life did not get what he wanted in death. Tragic. Number 5. John B. Kelly, who died in 1960, whose last wish was that the clothing bills of his daughter, who was named Princess Grace, did not bankrupt the Principality of Monaco. That's a prophetic man right there. He was a multimillionaire contractor who was a triple Olympic gold medal winner. His daughter, who was an actress named Grace Kelly, married into the royal family of Monaco, and his will was the last laugh at the good humor expense of his family. Some of the various amusing sections are, quote, to my son John, all my personal belongings, such as trophies, rings, jewelry, watches, clothing, and athletic equipment, except the ties, shirts, sweaters, and socks, as it seems unnecessary to give him something of which he has already taken possession. I leave you these. What a jerk. He left nothing to his son-in-law, Prince Rainier of Monaco, stating, quote, I don't want to give impressions that I am against son-in-laws. If they are the right type, they will provide for themselves and their families, and what I am able to give my daughters will help pay the dress shop bills, which, if they continue as they started out under the able tutelage of their mother, will be quite considerable. It's funny how a gold medalist from the Olympics is such a great writer. Okay, I think we're on number 4 already. Let's go to a tragic one. William Hearst, whose last wish was that anyone who could prove that, quote, he or she is a child of mine will receive the sum of $1. I hereby declare that any such asserted claim would be utterly false. His dying wish was really a revelation that he did not have a lot of relations with ladies. Hearst was an American newspaper magnate and leading newspaper publisher. The son of self-made millionaire George Hearst, he became aware of his father, as well as the fact that he received a Northern Carolina newspaper, which became the San Francisco Examiner. That's not in Carolina, they meant California, as a payment of gambling debt. He went on to ask his father to give him the paper and run it and eventually build it for himself, a multi-million-dollar empire. Hearst was the grandfather of Patty Hearst, the heiress who suffered from Stockholm Syndrome famously, but she only got $1 in her will, as did everybody else who claimed to be his child. Poor guy. Okay, number 3, Harry Houdini, who asked in his last will and testimony that his wife hold an annual sentence so he could reveal himself to her. Houdini, in his later life, became very interested in spiritualism. Many people don't know this. And he took a special liking to seances because of the great loss he felt upon the death of his mother. Quite tragic. I think there's a TV show in this. After a number of years trying to communicate with her through spiritualists, he gave up and decided that the whole thing was a bunkum, which back in that day meant a farce. In order to prove this, Houdini left his wife a secret note with 10 randomly selected words that he would communicate to her after his death. For 10 years, his wife held a seance on Halloween, but Houdini never showed up. Tragedy. Alright, number 2, the second to last, the penultimate, Napoleon Bonaparte, whose last wish was, quote, that he'd be shaved and the hair divided amongst his friends. What a weirdo. In a strange twist of the tale, a recent analysis of some of the hair that was kept by his friends, it is discovered that it contained large amounts of arsenic. Napoleon's symptoms prior to death, which were vomiting dry blood, inconsistent symptomatic analysis with arsenic poisoning. There is thus some speculation that the walls of his room contained arsenic, which was not uncommon at the time, and it was his environment that killed him. But others believe that it was being slowly poisoned by the English. In fact, due to his stomach cancer, his doctor was also prescribing him another type of poison, which contributed to his final demise. Nevertheless, it was overall pretty goofy that he asked that his hair be shared amongst his friends. With all due respect, if any of my friends requested that, I would tell them to screw themselves, even though it would be in the afterlife. Okay! Alright, honorable mention, T.M. Zink, who died in 1930. This was just a man who left $50,000 in a trust for 75 years, and at the end of this time, it swelled to $3 million, which was enough for him to find an organization that would build a womanless library. The words "no women admitted" were marked at each entrance. No books, works of art, or decorations by women were to be permitted in or about the premises. A lot of these wills and testaments really bring out the fact that none of these guys could get relationships with ladies. He went on to say, quote, "My intense hatred of women is not of recent origin or development, nor based upon any personal differences I ever had with them, but is the result of my experiences with women, observations of them, and study of all literatures and philosophical works." Shortly after the library was built, his family successfully challenged the will, and women were allowed into the library. Alright, number 1, John Bowman. The only reason this is number 1 is because it's so frickin' goofy. He asked that dinner would be prepared for him every night after his death in case he came back to life. The man's wife and 2 daughters had died before him, and he became convinced that when he died, his entire family would be reincarnated together. Oh, that's so sweet and so incorrect. Driven by this odd belief, he set up a trust worth $50,000, which would pay servants to keep the house clean across his 21-room mansion. He also requested that daily meals be prepared in case the family returned hungry. This will was honored until the trust ran out of funds in 1950, almost 60 years after his death. Can you imagine getting paid by a dead guy for 60 years? That'd be awesome. But you know what's not awesome? Is that it's time for me to thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It's time to go, folks. But while you're at it, why don't you goddamn go and subscribe to us, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and I think we have an Instagram account. You can also leave us a review on iTunes or comment on Speaker. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good night. I will see you this weekend.